sauce.
The sauce?
Is this the sauce?
It's just sauce.
So this is the sauce. The sauce! The sauce! The sauce! Stop saying the sauce.
I know.
Cloud knows. He knows that I spent more effort editing the first 15 seconds of the video than I did for the entire look back. Stop, Cloud. I'm gonna look back on this video in like 15 years, and I'm gonna be like, wow, I actually had editing skills back then. Too bad I never put them to use because I just make 1-hour videos with no editing at all. Did I just expose myself? Shit. Umbra, run the look back. What a wild ride this game has been, let me tell you. I was expecting an epic adventure and got exactly that. This game is quite short, and so is this look back. Hopefully. We'll see after editing. I believe that this game's length, though, it works to its advantage. It keeps players engaged the whole way while building much intrigue into the party's future. Naturally, we're operating under the same 3 categories of story, characters, and functions. However, due to a lot of character info being left to interpretation, or a lack of info to make inferences, I'll do my best to express what I think about the game's story and key players. Before I start though, similarly to Persona 3 Portable, I want to state that I have not consumed any other form of games or media of FF7. That includes, naturally, the 2 sequels to this game. The only other FF game I've ever played is FF15, which is its own self-contained adventure. With that context though, let's begin the last tour around Midgar's sectors before I join Cloud in the next town. If I had one word to describe the story, it would be explosive. There's rarely too much downtime in the story, and from the start it throws you into the action and introduces the factions and characters in quick succession. Pretty nice detail that Midgar's structure is inspired from Norse mythology that I now know thanks to God of War. Shinra is basically Asgard, or the ruling gods of this world, and exist in the center of the sectors. I enjoyed the topography and the landscape of Midgar. The peaceful plate living and paved roads really hide the ugly truth that is slum living, with all the fallen debris from the plates and the monsters that lurk outside of the settlements. The first 3 chapters of the game were exceptionally engaging as the tutorial. I feel that I learned about the general political and social atmosphere of the game almost immediately, and I understood Cloud's reason for indifference towards the way the world is. The presentation of action and environments are as seamless in-game as they are during cutscenes. It reminds me a lot of how fluid the transitions were in God of War. Upon playing Chapter 4 for the second time, with the full context of the game, I now know that whispers appear in order to assure that the current timeline flows according to destiny. The whispers first appear when they pull Aerith away during Cloud's escape, after she gives him the yellow flower. But now that I think about it, why was Aerith in Sector 8 at this time? Her house is in the Sector 5 area at the back of the slums, and it's never explained why she was there at that time in the game. I find it even more interesting that when you first help Aerith pick flowers for the Leaf House, she explains that the yellow flower symbolizes reunion. Perhaps it's symbolic because Cloud wields the Buster Sword, which is Zack's weapon, or perhaps she can see the future. So, here's where I start making some inferences as a FF7 newbie who only has this game to go off of. I believe that Aerith can see the future, but only the future that is the destiny set by the Whispers. Aerith is a Cetra, so she's able to communicate to all Mako living entities. I don't think it's a surprise if Aerith knew of the entire game's plot from the Whispers, and that's why she shows up in Sector 8, to confirm fate essentially, and to see if Cloud would be there. So going back to Chapter 4 now, I like the cool detail that the Whispers show up in the end to purposefully wound Jessie, so that Cloud and Tifa can accompany Barrett on the next reactor operation. We know Wedge was already out of commission after the Jessie job, but also, after seeing the Whispers in action, it made me kind of think. Maybe Biggs, Wedge, and Jessie were never destined to survive that night without Cloud. I would find it difficult to believe that the 3 of them would be able to hold their own against Roach, who was the soldier on the bike, capable of keeping Cloud busy. I think Roach was a third class soldier, but he's so minor that it's just another one of the characters that unfortunately don't get too much screen time. And that's all I can say about this chapter. Moving on to 5, 6, and 7, these chapters are the Avalanche Reactor job, where it's mostly straight up gameplay through 3 different environments. I enjoyed how much effort and how unique each one was. The only complaint would be how overhyped Shinra made the Airbuster. Compared to all the other advanced weaponry Shinra has, like the crab robot, fuck that guy. Heidegger really was gassing up the Airbuster for like nothing. There is also a funny set of interactions I got during my hard mode run, where if you mess up the Delta level lock for the Airbuster items at the end enough times, Barrett will actually give you encouraging dialogue to improve your rhythm, although it doesn't actually work. It's some funny and very missable dialogue. Chapter 8 comes up next, and we're introduced to the Turks, and we have a little reunion with Aerith. The Turks are honestly so cool. I love that despite being the execution task force of Shinra, they begin questioning their actions and motives after the Sector 7 plate incident. I really do hope that we see more of Reno, Rude, and Seng as well, given he didn't really have too much of an appearance. And I also want to know, how did Cloud survive the fall into Aerith's church? Perhaps it's just video game logic, but what I like to believe is that I believe that the Whispers delivered him there. Aerith was there to wake us up, so she had to have known that we'd be there. Other than that, Sector 5 was pretty much similar in landscape and quest as to Sector 7, but this is all, I think, to build up the absolute best hub, which is Walmart. Ket. The Chapter 9 is honestly my favorite chapter. I also played that damn chapter like a lot for, well, completion reasons. I think it's also one of the longest ones too. Aerith catches Cloud sneaking out of the sector, which is hilarious. Like who put all those items in front of Cloud's door? Like you're not telling me Aerith didn't put those items there? Like she knew what was up. But Cloud does the right thing. Instead of bringing Aerith home, he decides to bring her for a night out to the red light slums. Amazing. Everything about Wall Market was so enjoyable. I loved the overworld dialogue, the alleyways, the trio, the squats, the dancing, and it even had a quest that was memorable for me, which was the Party Never Stops odd job. If you're a completionist, like I said, you'll be playing this one a lot, because there's a lot of variability, and also there's different types of requests too based on your dialogue in Wall Market, so they put a lot of effort into this specific chapter. I'll never forget Hell House. It will always remain as one of the hardest bosses for me due to the shifting elements. Chapter 10 and 11 are next, and they're pretty much all about Cloud and company getting back to Sector 7 because of the plate falling threat from Don Corndog. Similar to the Avalanche Reactor chapters, it's mostly combat orientated in a unique environment. The sewers and train graveyards stepped up the bosses though, and I found myself having to strategize a lot more in hard mode to take these foes down. So, you remember how I said that this game was explosive? Well, Chapter 12 and 13 really take that literally, by destroying all of Sector 7. It's like Jotunheim all over again from God of War. President Shinra really does know what he's doing though. By killing off all of Sector 7, he essentially eliminates 3 birds with 1 stone. He destroys and cripples Avalanche, he extends Midgar's resources, and he sustains public opinion and approval. Biggs and Jesse unfortunately perish in the fight, and there's uncertainty that's rising in the Turks' decisions. In the aftermath, I'm glad that the game expands on the Shinra lab underneath Sector 7. Weimer, in the beginning of the game, briefly foreshadows it after you complete all the quests in Sector 7, and the fact that a bunch of failed experiments have existed directly below a living slums is disturbing to say the least. Chapter 14 is the last chapter of free play, as I like to call it, until you're locked in for the finale. I like the 3 different kinds of resolutions that you can see from your party members. Aerith is the canonical one. Tifa shows her vulnerabilities and worries, and Barrett, I would say, is my favorite, telling Cloud about all the other members of Avalanche and opening up more to him. The night is short-lived though, and as morning comes, the last set of quests in the game are also here. We get a brief introduction for Kiri, or Kirei, who I assume will have more of a presence in the next game. I get to see my boy, Johnny, off, and there's cameo quest for Square Enix's famous monsters like the Tonberry and the Behemoth. Pretty cool. I'm glad that they managed to fit in all of them as well, and there's the little Cactuar 2 appearance in the Fat Chocobo VR mission. Overall, a decent parting for all our Slums friends, and I like that we get to interact with all the named quest givers one last time before we head topside. Chapter 15 is next, and it's the beginning of the end. It's nice to see that the grappling hooks also work this time, unlike in Chapter 7, but perhaps they work a bit too well, because the choreography against the Valkyrie is some hilarious movie shit right there. There isn't any way that mech didn't shoot Cloud's line as he was bobbing and weaving in the sky with both Tifa and Barrett attached to him. Anyways, it was a cool combat section filled with plenty of nice views. And finally, chapters 16 and 17 are the Shinra chapters. You know, in every Shinra cutscene throughout the game, it is like perpetually nighttime. So either the pollution is so bad around the Shinra building, or they only operate at night. So does that make them a black company? I know, right? Actually a clever joke this time. By the way, the team makes their way inside and Tifa gets a little acrobatic section dedicated to her. I gotta say, the music to that part combined with the neon lights always makes me nod my head. The next section was hilariously memorable as well, and I'm glad I chose that for my first playthrough. So to get to the top floors, you can either take the elevator or the stairs with the keycard Tifa acquired. However, the game actually punishes you through 59 floors of actual gameplay climbing if you choose it. The dialogue is great, and there's a little stairs counter for you and your party as you're climbing. And once you make it to the top, there's finally Shinra lore. Even though I actually walked into an actual literal museum, I found it interesting to finally learn about the various Shinra departments. It's a little late to introduce new characters into the story. Well, here's another one. It's the mayor. Is the best. And also I don't even know where he is now, like, I guess he's just a guy that's still working for Shinra, but he's the best. The next few floors were also pretty cool to explore. Got to see the Shinra cafeteria, the meeting rooms, the combat sim, and most importantly, the men's washroom. Aw yeah, got to hit up the fancy Shinra's men's washroom. Such facilities don't exist in the slums. Everything there is unisex. Can't afford them. Anyways, the executive meeting begins, which, like all meetings, could have been an email. They don't really talk about too much important stuff. And I'm glad that the game decides to focus only on certain characters instead of trying to involve everybody. It creates a lot of intrigue to see their roles in the next games and gives them an air of mystery. Hojo, the only executive that kind of becomes the focal point, is our target from here on. And we get a nice little non-hostile tour around his facilities, meeting all sorts of lovely creations and creatures. And with the tour concluded, this is where the story reaches its climax. Okay, Sephiroth. About time I talked about him, right? So Sephiroth, to my understanding, is in the Shinra building somehow during Chapter 17. And it seems that his sole purpose is to retrieve Genova, which is being experimented on by Hojo. Now, for some reason, he then heads to the top suite to style on the president and Baird, because why not? And I love that the fact that he whispers, the whisperers revive Barrett, but not the president, because they're like, well, he's kind of killing the planet, and if the planet dies, then we die, so fuck him. I don't know, that's just kind of how I interpret it. The next fight with the Dreamweaver also had me confused. So, to my understanding, it's Sephiroth who transforms into it, but after we beat it, one of the roped experiments emerge instead. I'm not sure if I have enough context to discern the connection between these robed men and Sephiroth, but they do mutter reunion every now and then. Perhaps they all just need like Aerith's yellow flower or something. They'd be like, oh, I'm cured. No, I'm just joking. But what I really think is that these robed men may be all parts, different parts of Sephiroth, and he's trying to reunite them altogether to revive Jenova, perhaps. I mean, I was overwhelmed already with all the info I was processing. Then, Rufus is introduced, which I'm assuming will play a major role in the next game as the new Shinra Big Bad. And that's the end of these chapters after we check the President's prized vehicles and make our escape. Alright, so the last chapter, 18, is even more confusing to me. So, from what I understand, Sephiroth is this enigma who has the power to defy destiny since the Whispers have no control over him. He's not from this planet, and he even states that Cloud isn't either. It may sound crazy, but I actually believe Sephiroth. So Cloud is a first-class soldier, which is the highest tier. Sephiroth also is incredibly strong, and he's known as a war hero. So since they're both not from this planet, it would make sense for both of them to be far more powerful or just different than everyone else. If I'm interpreting this correctly, Sephiroth's endgame is to revive Jenova and to make his world a part of the universe. Whatever that entails though, I'm not sure, but he does give Cloud an opportunity to save the planet. Perhaps because he sees how Cloud's personality has changed over the course of the game. We do know that Sephiroth isn't entirely antagonistic or hostile towards Cloud in the game. In fact, he even tries to recruit him to join his cause at the edge of creation. So, in the 7 valuable seconds that he gives him, Cloud somehow is able to create this alternate ending to the events of the Sector 7 plate falling. The ending does show that the Sector 7 plate falling was not prevented. However, there were some slight changes. Biggs somehow survives and wakes up in the Leaf House, and Zack, another soldier who I am assuming is the one that Aerith loves, is also resurrected. But how did Cloud do this? I don't fucking know, honestly, but Aerith did warn us that by facing against the Whispers in Chapter 18 would mean not just altering fate, but also yourself. So this is what I think. We didn't just change the outcomes of the game, instead we just created another version of the game. Basically, it's like Cloud did an NG plus on his own life, which sounds pretty cool. But I'm more confused than anything. Multiverses and sci-fis always throw me off because the rules can always become paradoxes or incongruent with the rules they operate on. But I'm glad that there are 2 other games for this title to explore through to clarify all this conjecture that I'm basically spewing. And I would say if this game was to create intrigue for the future games, well, you got me locked in, I'll say that much. As for the intermission, the introduction of Yuffie and Sonon is very welcome given the Wutai's implication of being a crippled nation due to the conflict with Shinra. I was impressed with the amount of side content they put into it for only 2 small chapters, and I hope this means that Yuffie will meet up with Cloud and company in the next town and join them. For characters, we have our motley crew of 4, including Red 13, I guess, now as a guest party member. You know, I completely forgot to mention Red during the story, but he had such a minor role and presence that I'm sure he'll be way more relevant in the future. But let's begin with Cloud. This mysterious man grew up in an unnamed town that seems to be either on the plate side or somewhere outside of Midgar. The reason I infer this is because in the flashbacks you can see the sky, which isn't possible in the Midgar slums. Cloud grew up with Tifa in the same town and aspired to become a soldier. Looks like he won the lottery because he successfully became one, and one of the best as well. Rising to first class, Cloud not only survived the Mako experiments, but somehow managed to defect from Shinra without consequence. I found it interesting that despite Cloud being a first-class soldier, almost no one seems to recognize him. Besides the unnamed Shinra soldier that remembers him during Chapter 16, none of the Turks, Shinra executives, or even Hojo seems to recognize Cloud. Perhaps Cloud joined Shinra a long time ago, as he does mention that a soldier doesn't age due to the Mako. Either way, Cloud's a really fun protagonist, being this antisocial and dispassionate individual towards everything in life. He does explain that his entire life has been battlefields and combat, so he's not emotionally attached to people, ideals, or even the evident injustice in Midgar. However, this all changes once he meets Aerith. Cloud begins developing a purpose to fight, and shows compassion and worry for Aerith when she's captured by Shinra. And by the end of the game, he responds to jokes, he's more expressive, and he trusts in people as well. Cloud, however, is still a very mysterious protagonist, but honestly, every character kind of is right now. Tifa's next, and I am convinced that she is a vampire. Yep, that's right. I'll be the first to say it. She's got the dark red eyes and has everyone in the slums charmed for her. Out of our party of 4, I actually think that Tifa does have the weakest development in the game, at least as of now. So she's Cloud's childhood friend from their unnamed hometown, and during her adolescence, sometime during, I guess before she moved to Midgar, Sephiroth ends up killing her father. I hope I'm reading this flashback correctly, but Tifa picks up Sephiroth's long-ass katana and maybe vows revenge in her own way. Obviously, I have no idea what's going on in that scene, but somehow, later, Tifa makes her way to Midgar and settles down in Sector 7 as the barmaid for 7th Heaven. Sometime in between this, she also learned martial arts of the Dangan style. What that is, I don't know, but it's flippin' badass. Tifa has the coolest playstyle in the game, and her animations are so fresh. But despite not having unique characteristics such as Cloud and Aerith, Tifa appears to be very physically powerful and capable, able to handle herself against Shinra mechs and monsters without trouble. I do like how she is also quite worrisome. She constantly fears of the plate falling and is empathetic towards kind of everybody that we meet in the story. She portrays a very strong image, but she does show her vulnerable side to the party. Barret is the third, as the official ambassador of Avalanche and the honorary protector of the planet. After the intermission, I'm not sure if Barret is just using the Avalanche name, or he really is operating as a splinter group. Either way, Barret is the guy who speaks nothing but the truth the entire game, but nobody really wants to listen because they know it and they can't do anything to change it. It's never explained who Barret's wife is or if he adopted Marlene, as well as how or why he turned one of his hands into a machine gun. However, it's clear that these are all reasons why he has such hatred for Shinra and anyone involved. Barret has some great developing points during the game. His overall distrust on Cloud during the beginning of the game gradually turns into great trust in Chapter 14 in his resolution, where he wants to introduce Cloud to some of his members of Avalanche. I do feel like Barret has the weakest motive, however, in following Cloud outside of Midgar, since he's basically leaving behind everything, the fight against Shinra as well as Marlene, and this is one uncertainty I do have about the future of the story. Rufus doesn't exactly seem like a shining alternative to President Shinra, so isn't Midgar still going to be oppressed? Perhaps we'll return to continue the fight, but as of now, the future is a blank page, both for Cloud and for Midgar, or Barret, and Tifa, and especially Aerith. Speaking of Aerith though, I saved the best for last. Of course, because it's everyone's favorite florist, Aerith. Thankfully, out of all the mysterious characters, Aerith has the most known about her. She is a Cetra, or an ancient, which was an ancient civilization that had the ability to communicate with the planet. As the last of Cetras, Aerith is sought out by Shinra for experimentation, but apparently they can't force her to cooperate, so no harm has ever really come to her as she grew up. In the flashbacks, we learn that Aerith's mom's passing is caused by Hojo's obsession with the Cetra beauty. How she escaped isn't exactly explained, but I guess I'm to assume that Aerith's mom was captured by Shinra a long time ago, and since progress hasn't really been made, they need Aerith, so Hojo isn't exactly making good number reports, at these board meetings. Anyways, when meeting her formally for the first time at the church, the climbing section of the rooftops had to be the best banter in the game. I love Aerith's personality and sassiness. She appears as this prim and proper type of trope, but is quite a character when you see her in action, like threatening Don Corneo's mentionables, or executing a man with a chair. Despite her past being known though, there is still tons of mystery to her as well. I mentioned it briefly during the story portion, and I really do believe that Aerith is aware of how this story plays out. It's not surprising, due to her being able to communicate to all living planet organisms, which include whispers, since, they come from the planet. However, at the end of the game, I think Aerith is also hedging her bets as well, and has decided to put her faith into Cloud and the others to change that destiny. I said this was going to be short, but I'm like 6 pages into this script. Luckily, there isn't exactly too many functions in the game, so let's just quickly go through this. Let's start with the biggest one, combat. I feel that combat is as complex as you make it. Unless you're fighting against Weiss, you can stick to one character and just focus on their ATB, MP, and resources, or you can constantly switch characters and specialize each of them for a purpose so you can rotate them for pressure. Hard mode really puts all of your game knowledge to the test though, such as assessing elements and proper materia slotting. I will say that the dodge windows are very narrow, since you have to actually move out of the attack due to iframes being non-existent in the game. This game also makes the purple materia very useful, as they add accessibility options for mobility and resource management. As for the minigames, they're unique, short, and simple enough to be engaging for when they're introduced into the story. The Colosseum and the Combat Sim also posed their own unique challenges, which were great. I wish there was more variety than just solo and team fights though, with the same enemies, but then I realized I shouldn't wish for that when they introduced Vice. And that's it. I know, I think this look back has the least amount of side functions, so to conclude, as the first, and as my first FF7 game that I've played, I'm totally invested into the story and the characters. There is so much mystery as to what can happen, and I hope that my conjecture wasn't all too elaborate. Usually this is also the part where I announce our next destination, but given I'll be running 2 or more games at around the same time, the timeline will be difficult to predict, especially when this look back comes out. So, you know what? I'm gonna blame it on the Whisperers. These damn Whispers they're affecting my own timeline. Alright. You know what, Umbra? We need to work on a catchphrase, because now I don't have an outro.